Well, welcome back, ladies and gents. This is part 2 of the incredible Cathy O'Brien story. Okay? Discussing her survival for one horrific trip that her and her daughter had. So, where we finished off as we were talking about NASA. We were talking about Space Camp in Huntsville, Alabama, about the scientists coming over from World War II, Operation Paperclip, Germans and Italians, and what they were doing. With mind control. You can see at the bottom here, it says, movie now presents Cathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips, CIA's MK Ultra Mind Control documentary. All right, so now we're going to talk about her getting into the thick of it at the Ronald Reagan White House and who she meets and who she's with, okay? So, we're going to get this started.
Changes done in their history so that they cannot be found as to who they actually were. Well, most of those scientists that were involved in mind control and rocket propulsion during the 40s and 30s under Hitler's regime are now either dead or they're retired. They're old, very, very old. But their children who took their places are in fact working at the facility in Huntsville, Alabama, known as NASA.
But also a lot of war criminals from Germany didn't have any involved in any research got their home here.
Yes, the ones that are still living are still, many of them residing in the Huntsville area.
Oh, it's a very interesting phenomenon. I was involved myself in a long process of getting Kurt Waldheim file to trial, and I met people even in Justice Department, one very, I call them Don Quixote's organization among Justice Department,
yes,
who was tracing this war criminal with a lot of problems. And one book just came out recently, 2 years ago, called Betrayal, by Al Rosenbaum, who was head at the time of the Justice Department Criminal Division's Special Investigation on War Criminals. And he was describing what kind of trouble this organization had by tracing these criminals, even in the United States, which looks very, very unusual, but not unusual after I hear your story.
Well, that's true. Of course, when Linda Hunt did her book, she too ran into a number of obstacles with the Justice Department. She ran into, like you have, cooperative members, as well as people who tried to deter her from her research. Now, most of this research has, of course, been declassified, or most of the information that the research was based upon has been declassified and is available if someone is willing to dig it out. Well, she did.
Well, that's very interesting phenomenon. Now I'm living in the States. For me, living in for some period of time in communist pressure, I was very happy to come to the country which I thought is epitome of democracy and freedom and everything that we're hearing on a daily basis by most American politicians. Now we are facing one phenomena of having people who call themselves patriots, who call themselves people very scared for the future of something that they call World World Order, which was just as verbatim said by George Bush, which reminds a lot of people in Europe of the New World Order, which was done by Adolf Hitler. How you put these two things together?
Well, what we're concerned about is that mind control is being used today, as it was in Nazi Germany, as a tool of New World Order. You know, Adolf Hitler was really the second person in history to mention the fact that he thought that the only way that this globe or humanity would survive itself would be through a one world order, a singular government headed by a singular person. Well, Adolf Hitler wanted to ensure that that singular person be in absolute control. So he thought that by having human beings, that he could totally manipulate their minds externally. In other words, his puppets, or the people like Cathy O'Brien, people who had been conditioned, from birth and trained from birth to accept orders and to act on those orders without any social conscience. These are the ones that Adolf Hitler envisioned would be his puppets of control for the world. Well, the first person I might add was Nero in Rome, and Adolf Hitler was second. George Bush was the third person in history to stand before society and say the words New World Order. But mind control, Vuk, is only a tool. It's just simply a tool and an indicator, a social indicator, of what all of us can expect in the not too distant future, unless this information is released to the public where it belongs.
Cathy, you mentioned in your part of the book, which was very interesting for various people that I was introducing your book to, your knowledge, because you was a person inside. And I will ask you something that people don't have in your book, because you're not a professional writer, and it was maybe your first book that you're writing, and I hope not the last one. Can you give us some more accurate details about your knowledge of people that claim to be World War old? You met a lot of people. You was in the White House. You was in various military bases. Can you tell us some more information how you can determine those people that claim themselves to be a member of that order?
There was an organization that was referred to as the Order of the Rose, and this was an elite group that was at the very top of what I was aware of for the implementation of the New World Order through mind control of the masses.
Should you not mention the United Nations just recently adopted the rose as their official flower?
This Order of the Rose, by everything I know, was attached to the United Nations. George Bush, of course, began with the United Nations. He continued his work in the United Nations through his good friend and associate, Madeleine Albright. Madeleine Albright is now our UN ambassador, or not our UN, but the United States' UN ambassador. And this Order of the Rose was not so much another organization like we hear about, like the Illuminati or the Masons or something like that, but instead was used as an indicator to each other amongst those at the top that they were involved in implementing the New World Order through mind control of the masses. George Bush was involved in the Order of the Rose, and Bill Clinton was involved in the Order of the Rose.
What is your personal contact and contents to that topic? You met with people personally. You saw them wearing various symbols which remind people of that rose colors and everything else.
Yes, they would wear a rose as an indicator to each other that they were a part of the Order of the Rose. And
when it's happened and how you describe that, when you saw that particular phenomenon.
For example, at the White House, I was at a White House cocktail party during the Reagan administration, and...
Do you remember the year and the members, anything, like month and something like that?
It was, I believe, 1985 to 86, and at that time, the Prime Minister of Canada, Brian Mulroney, was brought to the White House. He was being honored at this particular cocktail party. He wore the rosebud on his lapel to indicate that he was a part of this Order of the Rose.
You saw him, you personally, at that party? It was some kind of a closed party, closed society, without presence of the journalists, I believe, right?
I'm not aware of any journalists that were there. There were quite a few people that were at this particular cocktail party. Not all of them wore roses. The ones that did certainly indicated to me, since I knew, that they were part of this Order of the Rose.
Who was there on the party? Who was
George Bush, Madeleine Albright, and Ronald Reagan, Senator Byrd, to name a few.
One interesting thing, there was a presidential helicopter that crashed in the state of Maryland in 1993, I believe in June of 1993. That was a helicopter that Bush used with some frequency. And one of the odd things about it was, instead of having the presidential crest embroidered into the seats, it had a rose. Now, Cathy O'Brien had reported the rose that was embroidered into the...
Hey, stop! I gotta rewind this so I can hear it again. Hey!
The Order of the
All right, we gotta
Rose.
get back to you
When
guys
it
here again
happened
because
and
my
how you
dogs
discovered
were.
that, when you saw that particular phenomenon.
For example, at the White House, I was at a White House cocktail party and during the Reagan administration, and
Do you remember the year and remembers anything, like month and something like that?
it was, I believe, 1985 to 86. And at that time, the Prime Minister of Canada, Brian Mulroney, was brought to the White House. He was being honored at this particular cocktail party. He wore the rosebud on his lapel to indicate that he was a part of this Order of the Rose.
You saw him, you personally, at that party? It
Yes,
was some
I
kind
did.
of a closed party, closed society, without presence of the journalists, I believe, right?
I'm not aware of any journalists that were there. There were quite a few people that were at this particular cocktail party. Not all of them wore roses. The ones that did certainly indicated to me, since I knew, that they were part of this Order of the Rose.
Who was there on the party? Who was
George
in the party?
Bush, Madeleine Albright, and Ronald Reagan, Senator Byrd, to name a few.
One interesting thing, there was a presidential helicopter that crashed in the state of Maryland in 1993, I believe in June of 1993. That was a helicopter that Bush used with some frequency. And one of the odd things about it was, instead of having the presidential crest embroidered into the seats, it had a rose. Now, Cathy O'Brien had reported a rose that was embroidered into the leather seats of a helicopter in 1990 to the FBI when she gave her testimony. But it wasn't until 1993 that we actually got corroboration of that through a news report when a presidential helicopter actually crashed with, of course, no one in it of any importance as far as politically goes. But nevertheless, the helicopter did crash, and photographs of the seats were taken.
So there, photographs available?
Yes,
in that respect.
yes.
Yes, sir, and the rose indicator was, that I saw in George Bush's helicopter was black. This black rose was an indication of death. The red rose was an indication that I would be used in sexual mode for prostitution purposes. The white rose was an indicator that messages were being delivered. When baby's breath was surrounding the rose or the rosebud, there was an indicator that my daughter Kelly was usually involved in that particular operation, which meant that she was going to be sexually abused as well.
These were her cues. These were visual cues that the person delivering them would be privy to, Boog, but no one else.
And these, in the course of using these particular cues, they would simply touch the rose to access a particular program message or to program one in. That wasn't all that it took to set the program. There was so much that was done at the onset, so much trauma that I witnessed that had caused my mind to be primed for accepting program, and this base program was already laid. From the base program, other programming specific programming, the delivering of messages was then added, or the particular sexual perversion that had to be fulfilled was added. And then they were ready to be accessed, and when it was time to be accessed, they would simply touch the
You just
rope.
mentioned that you was testifying in front of FBI.
Yes.
What kind of testifying was that we're talking about?
In 1989, I brought forward the diaries of her controller or handler, Alex Houston, because these diaries contained a number of large cash transactions among high-ranking officials, both within the Justice Department, in the entertainment business, as well as some politicians, including...
Cathy, you have in front of you a list of the people that you collected after your recollection of everything that happened after you was rescued by Mark Phillips. People that you can say and swear the member of the Rose. Can you give me this list and tell me what people are on that list? And you also having a list of all drug traffickers that you was acquainted with. You met them and you work with them.
Yes, this is a partial list that I've compiled. It was just a matter of listing some names for convenience purposes for people investigating. And I refer to it as a perpetrators list because these are certainly traitors of our country that are involved in implementing the New World Order under this group that they refer to as the Order of the Rose. And the orders from the Rose were orders from George Bush. That's not to say he was the very top person in this effort, but he certainly was in this, the aspect of it that was going on in our country, Canada, Mexico, and throughout the Caribbean. One of his primary people that was working under him in the UN capacity was Madeleine Albright, and Madeleine Albright was part of the Order of the Rose that was involved in the Caribbean operations, and even had an office in the Organization of American States office in Washington, D.C.
You visited her. Can you tell me more details how you came in touch with her? And you told me that she also sexually harassed you in that office at the time. Can you tell me approximately the time frame and when it's happened and when you visited, who brought you to this meeting with her, and what was the purpose of the meeting?
This was in, I believe it was 1985. I have a little more difficulty with exact dates and times because as a program...
If I remember correctly, it's about to get pretty racy here. If this is the part she's talking about, her and Madeleine Albright.
Multiple, in essence, it was as though it were one long day to me. I was not aware of time, my age, or anything else, but Madeleine Albright was at the White House cocktail party that was being thrown for Brian Mulroney, Prime Minister of Canada, who is also Order of the Rose. And
main purpose for you being there was what?
Was for prostitution to Brian Mulroney at that time. But anytime I was in Washington, D.C., it was usually multi-purposed, as was this particular trip. And after having been prostituted to Brian Mulroney that
Can you explain me the situation in more details? Who brought you there, and what was the room that was used for that reason? Also in White House, or he was guest in White House? He slept in White House?
Yes. He had a room in the White House at that time, and I was brought into a White House cocktail party for the purposes of making contact with Brian Mulroney for prostitution later that evening in his room in the White House.
How his room? Can you describe this room?
It was one of the nicer guest quarters that they have in the White House, and it was actually a suite. It wasn't just a bedroom. There was an outside room to it that had a sofa in it and some comfortable furniture. But also in that room, by the time I entered, were 3 other girls, one of which was a very dear friend of mine who remains a dear friend of mine to date. She's a mind-controlled slave of U.S. Senator Arlen Specter. She's not free at this time. She is amnesic of most of the events, and she's anxiously awaiting the day that someone will be able to rescue her from her ongoing mind control existence.
What is her name, and where is she located now?
For her safety, I will not say her name or her location, but I will say that she has flashes of memory at times. And when I was talking with her recently, she said that...
You met with her in person?
Yes, I've seen her since. She knows that the book Transformation of America has been written, and she finds tremendous hope for her and her children and for other mind control victims, that someone is actually vocalizing the atrocities that are going on in this country.
To come back to the topic of Mulrooney, so
Yes.
you was brought to the entrance of the White House, especially
Yes.
which entrance you was using for?
Service entrance. And to exemplify how the mind control slaves' subconscious is so literal, my escort, Secret Service escort, stopped outside the door and pointed out the sign that said service entrance on it to me and enunciated it quite differently so that I understood it to read, serve us in trance. And the service entrance was very often how I was brought into the White House. He took me inside and up to the room that was being used for a cocktail party. Well, actually, it's a series of rooms. It's all interconnected where you walk from one right on into
It was
the
during
other.
the Reagan administration, right?
Yes.
President Reagan. President
Reagan
Reagan
was president at the time, and
Mrs. Reagan was not there, or she was there?
not that I saw. She wasn't. I never had any association with her, and didn't see her around at all.
So
But
who brought you there? I mean, just Secret Service, but who was your mind control operator at the time?
at the time, my handler was Alex Houston. Alex Houston was the one who was part of the country music industry, which was the cover for our travels that brought me wherever I was ordered to go. U.S. Senator Robert C. Byrd was my owner, and as my owner, Senator Byrd directed my activities. He's the one who told Alex Houston to have me in specific places at designated times. And on this occasion, it was Senator Byrd who ordered that Alex Houston bring me to the White House. And it also, because I had other business in Washington that I would have to be tending and mind control programmed for at that particular time. So Alex Houston had brought me to Washington and left me off with the Secret Service, who escorted me into the White House and to the rooms, the series of rooms where this particular cocktail party for Brian Mulrooney.
So there was, you spent all night in bed with him and having intercourse with him, or?
Not all night, just until he was sexually gratified, and then I left from there and was with Senator Byrd, as was so often the case.
What do you mean by you was with him after you slept with him as well?
Yes, very often there were a series of men that I would have to sleep with have sex with in one particular night. But as a sex slave, there was no personal interaction, there was no conversation, there was no keeping me around for any purposes. I was simply there for sexual gratification purposes. And that was the case on this night. As I was going through this cocktail party, George Bush and Madeleine Albright were also present. And George Bush signaled me to come over to he and Madeleine Albright and talk. And it was there that Madeleine Albright ordered that I would be brought to her OAS office the next day.
So she said that you mentioned in your book, I remember the page 167 even by heart, that George Bush told you about Margaret Albright. Who is she and something like that.
Well, yes, he made some jokes to the effect that she was the, quote, Reverend Mother of all sisters, which cryptically meant that she ordered mind control slaves such as myself around. And that particular cryptic language was indigenous to the Catholic Vatican, the Jesuit mind control aspect of my victimization. So the Order of the Rose and the Catholic influence that I was experiencing at that particular time put me into the Catholic Jesuit mode of operation that I had been previously programmed for and conditioned for, and was often used for carrying out particular Caribbean operations.
And now your second meeting with her was in that building that you was mentioning before. Can you
Yes,
describe the building and her office and how it looks like and how this event had happened?
Well, the OAS building is located in Washington, D.C., and Alex Houston dropped me off out front. I went through the front door, and there's like a hallway that goes all the way through the OAS building and right out to the back where there's a rock garden. Her office...
How the garden looks like? There's some elements you can describe.
This guy really gets on my nerves when he wants. Who cares about the rocks?
A little walkway, like a sidewalk, where people who work there, people who were brought in, could go outside. There were different rocks, some trees and shrubs there, and a lot of Caribbean art was around the woodwork. I noticed that there was some Haitian artwork in particular that I recognized from having been in Haiti on operations so many times.
So you was first probably, you went through the guard there and who told you where you're going, right? And first somebody asked you where you're going, or?
No, I just went straight in. I already knew where I was supposed to go, and I'm sure that the different indicators that I was wearing was a tip to many that I was part of the CIA operations anyway. I, too, had to wear the different roses, and particularly in my hair. But I had been given a little red rosy cross when I was first brought into the Order of the Rose.
Could you just keep this, what you was talking yesterday, and I just want to be curious if you can tell us on camera that. You went to her room and she was sitting there, right? And she was...
Yes, after
what's
we
happened
talked
that...
outside and I had received my orders, she brought me back into her office, which is located near the rock garden, and it's on the left as you go in. The office was really quite small, but it too had some of the Caribbean art on the walls. Some Haitian carvings were around the room. There was a file cabinet. Overall, it was a relatively small office because it was not her main office. But this OAS office was directly connected to the United Nations, and anytime I was around Madeleine Albright, the Catholic Jesuit aspect was accessed and used, and she accessed my sex programming at that time and made me perform oral sex on her before leaving.
So how long was this action? So what she did was she just take her clothes off and order you to order oral sex on her?
Well, actually, she just removed her panties. She was wearing a dress at the time, a longer skirt, which was more suitable for summer. It was a summer type weather anyway, and she just removed her nylon panties and had me perform oral sex on her while she sat in her office chair. And
was she excited with that? Did she have orgasm?
Yeah.
What you can think of? How long you stayed there in her office?
As long as it took. I really don't know how long it was. Any time for something so disgusting is too long. But it was just until she was sexually gratified, and then I was just ordered to leave.
So what kind of order did she give you in that particular moment when she met with you?
Well, she just accessed the sex program part, the same part like Hillary Clinton would use, and that was done through the sister references, particularly a twin sister reference where the sex programming had actually already been instilled, and the removal of her panties and with her spreading her legs and giving me orders was really all
crystal clear.
So in other words, you was completely automatic. So you was just because of your mind control and your robotic behavior in the time.
Totally robotic. And I had no ability to do anything other than what I was instructed or what I had been previously trained to do. And she was well aware of the fact that I was programmed and trained. She was aware of the fact that I was used in pornography with Larry Flint's Hustler magazine.
Okay, you have some magazine where you can see the photographs of you on that magazine.
Those are available.
They're available on the Larry Flint's and Enterprise and Hustler magazine. Okay, what I would like to ask you, this question that we were starting this programming, this particular segment was about your knowledge of other members of the Order of the Rose. That you can, did you give any testimony to any organization like FBI or anything regarding that Order of the Rose?
No organization like that. As a matter of fact, there are certain factions, criminal factions of the government that are involved in this. There's certain factions of CIA and certain factions of FBI, much lesser on the FBI. This was...
Okay, we've gone in, we're 46 minutes in, we've gone 30 minutes on this right here. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to end it right here, and we'll start part 3 tomorrow. Now, she's implicated Madeleine Albright. She implicated Hillary Clinton. She talked about Robert Byrd, the head of the KKK. She talked about Ford. Tomorrow it's going to be, and she talked about George Bush Sr. and the New Order of the Rose and the New World Order, which we've heard all about that. He also had a speech about 1,000 Points of Light, which is satanic in nature, which I'm going to try to pull that up on YouTube. Maybe have that for tomorrow. Anyway, tomorrow it's going to be Bill Clinton, Jr., Cheney, and some other people. That she's going to go more in graphic detail than the oral sex with Madeleine Albright and Hillary Clinton. It's going to get pretty hairy, guys. And I hate to use that word. It's going to get pretty hectic, I should say, not hairy. Some of these scenes that she's going to describe with Junior and Cheney, it just kind of makes the hair on your back of your neck and your arms stand up. It really does. But I'm going to get that for you tomorrow. That'll be part 3. This is part 2. I've already done part 1. So part 3 tomorrow with that. And then I'm going to dive in further and probably find some other videos maybe. Because I think it's like the middle of this video where she starts talking about how her handler gets her there. Her daughter is now involved. And what happens to her daughter. And who's abusing her daughter. Who's abusing her at the same time. Her daughter's being abused. And what happens to her daughter after this event happens at the cabin. It's just, it's bad, guys. It's real bad. Okay? And you won't look at these people the same again. I've been awake for a long time. Hopefully you're going to wake up when you hear these names. But we're talking about not just presidents and kings and prime ministers and queens. We're talking pastors. Now, she's not talking about that. There's other traffickers, victims of this type of CK ultra mind control that were all done like this, that were victims of pastors, victims of rappers, victims of movie stars, of celebrities, sports figures. But she's talking about, she was the pioneer of this that came out and started this whole thing with the discovery, and she's dropping the names and she's bringing the receipts. And like I said, she said she had all those diaries and nobody ever wanted to take her to court because the judges knew that if they went to court and discovery, they would find that all these people she's naming in this book and in these diaries, they're all guilty. And it'd be a matter of national security. My ass. All right, guys, so we got 34 minutes. I thank you very much for spending 34 minutes with me. And 35 minutes at the other time. I appreciate it. So it's a little over an hour. Appreciate it very much. If you like it, like, share, follow, comment. Please help grow my channel. I appreciate it. Y'all have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. Enjoy Chicago Wednesday if you like Chicago's. I do. Woohoo. Bye, guys.